And what I suggest this factor is, or was, psychoactive plants in the environment, specifically psychoactive plants in the grasslands environment in which human pastoralism evolved in Africa over 1 million years ago. The plant must be African. It must be extraordinarily noticeable in the environment. It must not be a deep forest endemic, because this is not where human evolution was taking place. The only plant which fits this description is a mushroom of the psilocybin-containing variety. And it's very easy to see, I think, that the presence then of psychoactive compounds of this sort in the early human diet set the stage for a number of structural and psychological changes. This means that those animals not including the psychoactive substance in their diet will be mitigated against and fade from the scene. And by this process, a steady bootstrapping process, self-reflection was born in our species. How do we get from visual acuity to self-reflection? Low doses of psilocybin give increased visual acuity. Medium-range doses of psilocybin give an increased interest in erotic activity. You should laugh. There may not be too many laughs with this one. Slightly higher doses of psilocybin give an experience of the numinosum, an actual contact with a mystery in the human psyche, which is no less mysterious to us today than it was to our ancestors when the last glaciation was retreating against Canada. I mean, don't kid yourself. In the face of this, the content of this symbiotic relationship, modernism, rationalism, positivism, all is exposed as just whistling past the graveyard, because the numinous depth of the mystery that seems to have called us out of the animal mind is completely impenetrable to modern analysis. That's why even discussing its presence is mitigated against so intensely. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this early facet of the emergence thing. I want to move ahead and show that as pastoralism developed, as the domestic relationship between cattle, human beings, and mushrooms settled down into a self-reinforcing cycle of consciousness, language arose, religion arose of the goddess-oriented variety, and the connection of the cow to the goddess is there at the dawn time. There is no question about it. Language seems to have been the particular prerogative of women in the early emergent phases. This is possibly because men were involved in hunting activities where great premium is placed on silent stealthiness, while women were engaged as gatherers in the hunting-gathering phase. Women were engaged in gathering plants. And as all botanists can tell you, gathering plants involves an extensive taxonomic language, so that the difference, the minute differences between cereal grains and insects and all of these things need to be linguistically defined and characterized. And to this day, a taxonomic description of a plant is a Joycean thrill to read, because, you know, subapically glabrous with lanceolate trifolium, and so on for many, many lines. But in a strange way that is a law repeated over and over again through history, each advance somehow outsmarts itself. And the wonderful linguistic depth which women attained as gatherers through the production of folk taxonomy eventually led them to a terrible discovery, the discovery of agriculture, because they learned that rather than maintain this vast library of shifting information about seasonal plants randomly distributed or distributed according to the whims of nature, they could in fact focus on a very small number of plants, learn how to grow these plants, learn their needs alone, and at that point the retreat was on and the dualism was fully in place, and there was that which was domesticated, that which was of the hearth, and that which was of the Ausland, the howling unknown, that which was beyond the pale. I think it was Weston LeBar, great old anthropologist, who felt, he said, hallucinogens can only be used in hunting and gathering cultures because when agriculturalists use them, it makes it impossible to get up at dawn and go hoe the fields. And so suddenly the gods become the corn gods and the wheat gods, gods of symbolizing domesticity and hard labor and that sort of thing. And at this moment of agriculture, which led to overproduction, which led to trade, which led to cities, and so forth, there is a beginning of the breaking away of this symbiotic relationship which had bound human beings to nature to this time. And I don't mean this metaphorically. I mean, I want to be taken seriously as proposing that the ennui of modernity is the consequences of a disrupted symbiotic relationship between ourselves and vegetable nature, and that only a restoration of this in some form is going to carry us into a full inheritance of our birthright as human beings. Now, what did this symbiotic relationship consist of? What was the effect of this psychedelic use, this embeddedness of language-using, cognition-using, but stoned primates in the natural order? Well, I submit to you that what it was, or how it acted operationally, was as a feminizing pheromone, that the continuous exposure to this tremendum represented by the hallucinogenically induced ecstasy acted to continuously dissolve that portion of the psyche which as moderns we call the male ego. And I don't mean that it only worked on men. I mean that wherever in human personalities this certain catch began to form and build like a calcareous tumor in the personality, the psycholytic presence of the undeniable fact of the tremendum tended to dissolve this back into Tao, psychic health, however you wish to style it. And that the evolution of language then, setting up this movement off into specialization and a movement away from nature, set up the consequences of the ennui which permeates Western civilization. It is only in Western civilization that you get this steady focus on this monotheistic ideal and working out the implications of what is essentially a pathological personality pattern, the pattern of the omniscient, omnipresent, all-knowing, wrathful male deity. No one you would invite to your garden party.